On February 11, 2020, the World Health Organization announced the official name of the disease that has been causing the worldwide coronavirus disease outbreak. The official name is 2019 coronavirus disease. The virus that causes COVID-19 is a novel coronavirus, which means it is a strain of virus that has not been previously identified in human beings. It is something new that we have never encountered before. Our topic for today is social distancing and freedom of assembly. On March 16, 2020, President Donald Trump issued a national guideline to slow down the spread of coronavirus with a time frame of 15 days. This came to be known as Guidelines for Social Distancing. He later on extended these to April 30, 2020, as coronavirus cases continued to rise. What is social distancing? According to Johns Hopkins University, social distancing is a public health practice that aims to prevent sick people from coming in close contact with healthy people in order to reduce opportunities for disease transmission. It can include large-scale measures like canceling group events like weddings or closure of public spaces like public schools, as well as individual decisions such as avoiding crowds. It is the goal of social distancing to flatten the curve. This means that the rise of COVID-19 infections can be decreased and become more manageable until the pandemic crisis disappears. While state governments have been cooperative in implementing social distancing to flatten the curve, there are certain people or groups of people who defy the social distancing guidelines, putting not only themselves at risk from getting infected by the virus, but infecting others as well, which include their families. A lot of young people, thinking that they are invincible in getting the coronavirus, defy social distancing guidelines. In other countries like India, United Kingdom, Italy, China, Philippines, among others, violators of social distancing policies can be arrested, fined, and imprisoned. This action may most likely be difficult to implement in the United States, especially that President Trump is bent on easing the federal guidelines on social distancing amidst warnings from health experts that this could be risky. Can freedom of assembly be advocated, therefore, to defy social distancing guidelines or to support President Trump's administration to ease federal guidelines on social distancing to open the economy? Let us first be clear, then, on what freedom of assembly is. Freedom of assembly, along with other freedoms like freedom of speech and religion, are enshrined in the United States Constitution. Specifically, the First Amendment to the United States Constitution states, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. The First Amendment to the United States Constitution prohibits the United States Congress from enacting legislation that would abridge the right of the people to assemble peacefully. The 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution makes this prohibition applicable to all state governments. The Supreme Court of the United States has held that the First Amendment protects the right to conduct a peaceful public assembly. In the landmark case of Cox versus Louisiana, 1965, the Supreme Court held that a state government cannot employ breach of the peace statutes against protesters engaging in peaceful demonstrations that may potentially incite violence. In another landmark case, Edwards versus South Carolina, 1963, the Supreme Court forbade state government officials in enforcing a crowd to disperse when they are otherwise legally marching in front of a state house. The right to assemble is not, however, absolute. Yes, government officials cannot simply prohibit a public assembly in their own discretion, but the government can impose restrictions on the time, place, and manner of peaceful assembly, provided that constitutional safeguards are met. In the same way as there are limits on freedom of speech, so there are limits on freedom of assembly. The courts have held that government may set rules on where, when, and how public protests and other gatherings can take place. These rules must, however, be reasonable, not content-based, meaning they are not an attempt to repress or thwart demonstrations based on their political message, and narrowly tailored, meaning they're designed to serve legitimate concerns like safety, with as few restrictions as possible on constitutional rights. The First Amendment does not provide the right to conduct an assembly at which there is a clear and present danger of riot, disorder, or interference with traffic on public streets, or other immediate threat to public safety or order. Statutes that prohibit people from assembling and using force or violence to accomplish unlawful purposes are permissible under the First Amendment. The doctrine of clear and present danger was first articulated in the landmark case on freedom of speech, Schoeneck versus United States, 1919, where it was held that shouting fire in a movie house creates a clear and present danger. Thus, the First Amendment does not protect speech that creates a clear and present danger of bringing about substantive evils that Congress has power to prevent. The clear and present danger test was later on replaced by the imminent lawless action test. This test concludes that speech can be restricted by the First Amendment if it follows two criteria. First, the speech invites imminent lawless action, and second, the speech is likely to produce said action. This was adopted from the landmark case of Brandenburg versus Ohio, 1969, where Brandenburg, a leader of the Ku Klux Klan, made a speech promoting the taking of vengeful actions against government and was therefore convicted under the Ohio law. Some of you may be wondering why we are talking of freedom of speech when our topic is freedom of assembly. This is because the right of assembly is closely linked to its more famous companion in the First Amendment to the United States Constitution, which is freedom of speech. Both rights have been at the heart of controversies for much of our country's history, from picketing strikers in the 1930s to the civil rights sit-ins in the 1960s, from KKK rallies in the 1920s to white supremacist marches in the 2010s. But the right to gather with others isn't limited to political protests. It can also include simply hanging out with friends in public, or as the U.S. Supreme Court put it, the freedom to loiter for innocent purposes, Chicago versus Morales, 1999. It may also mean any gathering of two or more people. Violence or the threat of violence isn't the only limit on the right of assembly. Authorities may also prevent or stop gatherings that clearly pose other immediate threats to public safety. In our situation today, restricting freedom of assembly, limiting gathering of people, social distancing, lockdowns in order to prevent the spread of coronavirus does not violate our First Amendment rights because there is a global pandemic which does not only threaten public health and safety, but the survival of the human race as well. But some people still insist on their distorted perception of freedom of assembly, defying the limitations of this freedom, especially during this coronavirus pandemic. They ignore social distancing and lockdowns. As of yesterday, March 28, 2020, Maryland troopers have been called to look into 277 cases of gatherings of 10 or more people and continued restaurant operations. This is despite the order from the governor to observe social distancing and closures of restaurants. Other states are beginning to enforce much stricter penalties on such violations. No, our right to freedom of assembly is not being taken away. It is temporarily being restricted to safeguard public health and safety until this pandemic becomes manageable or controlled. President Trump is facing criticisms on a daily basis on how he is handling the coronavirus pandemic, which has astronomically escalated in the United States, surpassing that of China and Italy. But the president has a different perception. How is President Trump handling the coronavirus pandemic? When asked how he would rate his administration in handling coronavirus, he replied, "I'd rate it a 10. I think we've done a great job." Listen closely. This is the time when we expect our leaders to lead and not make excuses for their failure to lead. Be safe. God bless. Stay at home.